good day. It is beautiful out here. I'm Jordan Passman, CEO and founder of Score, and we have the amazing Amanda Levine coming in from New York. Amanda is the Senior Director of Music and Licensing. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We've known each other for so long, so this is so nice to do to do a little gig like this.
I was going to say, when I started the company in 2010, you were one of the first people I met because we had all these mutual friends you went to Wisconsin with. And
Yeah.
anyway, really fun. So, can you tell us a little bit about your journey in music licensing and how you ended up landing at Platinum Rye?
Yeah, of course. So I was kind of like any college student, a little all over the place, had summer internships in totally different industries. I had made the choice, I believe, my junior year of college to sort of pursue a music route. I was a film major at school. And so basically, it was sort of eventually marrying music, film, TV, and now we call it music supervision. At the time, I'm not really sure that it had the formal name, but basically, I think anyone who does this job thought that they would be doing that, back in the day. And so I interned at RCA Music Group, which was kind of when Jive, Zamba, if anyone's around those days, kind of merged together. And so I worked in their licensing department there. And then I just was lucky and good relationships, Wisconsin alumni, and tenacity, I guess, to get this job. And I'm one of few that have been at the company for a long time, but
I
I
was
have
going to say,
been.
you're the most tenured I think I know for sure. Can you tell us a little bit, like, what's your day to day look like now?
Yeah, so primarily I'm doing a lot of music related work. So that could be music supervision, which is, as most of us know who may be on the call, finding, sourcing music that fits for creative briefs that come in. Let's say the client can't afford a song that they want and it's too expensive or it's not available to use for them. We'll try to find other options for them. Music clearance, so the aspect of licensing, which is sourcing the rights owners for music, reaching out to reps, labels, managers, agents, publishers, to send a request and negotiate terms, everything from seeing through the middle as well as the end, which is contracting, helping the brand understand the terms, what they're getting, and then close it into contracts, signatures, and then hopefully going to air.
Can you give us some examples of clients you've worked with and maybe some memorable campaigns that really you feel like made a positive impact?
Yeah, sure. So I feel like a lot of people know our company for working with Procter and Gamble. So they are the biggest in CPG.
Just like a tiny startup. Yeah.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. And I work with a lot of those types of companies. So Amazon as well, Gap, I work with as well, Inc. And so, it does get a little overwhelming sometimes since there's a lot to navigate in those larger companies. But it has led to a lot of great work. So a couple of examples I'll talk about is I had worked on Gap music clearance, licensing, and sourcing or supervision for the last like 4 years or so. And so what was really fun about working with Gap is that music is sort of endemic to their brand, and it kind of always has if you sort of look at the history of their advertising. So I feel like that's just been a really fun one to work on because they go back into like 80s, 90s music, but they also want current stuff. So we did license John Batiste, and the commercial was ran in the Grammys last year when he won. So that was like a really fun moment, full circle moment for everyone. And then on the P&G front, kind of one of the bigger ones I did recently was getting the Backstreet Boys to be on camera in a Downy commercial, which was promoting a new product of theirs, Downy laundry detergent. And we also licensed I Want It That Way, or a version of I Want It That Way, and changed the lyrics to fit the brief. And the client was really happy, so much so that they just renewed it for another year. So that's always fun when they do that.
Amazing. Renewals are like probably our favorite thing of all time because
Yep.
essentially you get the same license plus usually like 10, 15% more, and it just continues the run and everybody's happy and everybody wins.
Yeah, and it's simple because in most cases it can be pre-negotiated. So as a negotiation standpoint, it's helpful for all parties because then you have less to worry about later, and it's sort of already set, and you confirm and you paper it. So it's super easy.
Yeah, so going over negotiating, walk us through sort of your approach of negotiating, like from the initial discussion to, okay, we want to look at a song, and then actually finalizing that agreement. Like, what are some of the intricacies that you're dealing with?
Yeah. So, you have the mixed bag of clients, whether it's brand, an agency, a producer, whoever is kind of fielding the request to you. You have some people who are well versed in this area, and you have those that don't. So, kind of my always sort of go to in the beginning is we do have to be somewhat clear on what we want to use the music for. A lot of people are just like, we want to use it for a year. How much does that cost? Unfortunately, that's not the way our business works. You sort of need to give some more information up front, like how long, but besides how long you're running it, what media you're using. Are you using the original recording, or do you want to create a re-record or use a cover? Do we want exclusivity, which is basically precluding certain brands or product categories from using the song, which sometimes factors into the price. So not that everything has to be answered right away, but general gist of information, just so we can get that conversation started, helps a lot. My philosophy is like always being transparent, because I feel like the more difficult you make things, it's only going to make it more difficult to negotiate, to keep that relationship going with the people you're negotiating with. Because if I've learned anything, you work with the same people all the time. So you want to maintain those really strong, honest relationships, because you're going to keep going back time after time. So I think it's being transparent in the information as best we can. Being honest about what the goals are for the client, as well as on your side of things, like you telling us, like, is this an easy song to clear, is it not, or what are some of the roadblocks we might overcome? So I think for me, the transparency is really key to success in really any type of deal that you're negotiating.
Sure. I mean, one of the main advantages of Scores being a one-stop shop for licensing, publishing, master, everything, in one place. A lot of the times you're going through crazy hurdles, like going investigation mode. I know for us, like when we've cleared third-party songs, like we were Facebook messaging like rights holder's grandson because we couldn't find anyone that like owned this like 10% piece. Have you ever gone through some crazy loops yourself?
Yeah, kind of like earlier in my career when we started probably when Facebook was like just really becoming a thing, not such HS or anything, but um I MySpace was still a thing at the time, and I remember clearing a rapper Nelly song, and there was a background singer that we just could not find. And so I went on MySpace and I searched and searched and searched, and eventually I found her.
Amazing.
And so she confirmed that it was her, and did all the paperwork to get her consent and all that. So yeah, I mean, that's probably to some people would even seem simple, but I feel like that, being a detective is definitely part of the
Yeah.
job.
Oh, yeah. And a good one at that.
You
The
try to be.
landscape has sort of changed so much since we started in this industry. Like, where do you see the trends now, sort of on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that most, not all, but a lot of campaigns now want to have that social component and influencer component. So it's pretty rare now that we have deals where they're not thinking about the PR element and trying to use the song and integrate it into some sort of digital campaign, whether it's a TikTok challenge or something that draws people socially, just because they know that so much of their target audience is there. So I think we're going to keep seeing like new media emerge as sort of primary licensing usages. I think at this point is fair to say that we're definitely headed in that direction.
Oh, yeah. Something else I've noticed a lot is this is going out for testing and how big of an emphasis data and analytics are in actually making creative decisions. So
Yeah.
how much are you seeing that from your side as well?
Yeah. I feel that there are a lot of brands that do that. Definitely the sort of big box Fortune 100 company, I think they probably have more at stake and more risk because their money is they're global brands and they have to kind of be paying attention to those details. So I would say definitely working with a P&G, for example, that they're very heavy in testing and they'll have to test things one, two, maybe three times over before they'll, commit to something, which, in our position is sort of tough because you don't want to lose the creativity part of our job, right? And I feel like when you put too much emphasis on data, you sort of lose the sort of I'm blanking on the word right now. But you lose just sort of that like surprise element or sort of like the unexpected elements of just like when something works and it just works because you like just the things sort of all aligned. So I feel like the goal is always to marry enough data with the creative side to sort of bring together the best creative forward.
Yeah, or just have a really good creative concept and then just have it validated by the testing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge becomes every brand sort of identifies success differently.
Yes.
So, to some it will be the brand's awareness. It will be like you heard the song in the test. Do you know what that song is? Like they're trying to use different markers for recognition. And so that's why there's probably no like, unfortunately, there's no one size fits all in that scenario. But I feel like the more people recognize how much music especially does for it enhances creative the emotional impact all the physical psychological there's enough studies to show that, so it's you would think that there's enough to sort of prove the worth, and thus brands hopefully putting more money in the pool for investment for projects like that.
How are you feeling about AI, and is it coming up in your contracts as like this cannot be created with AI or anything like that yet?
Yeah, I think it depends who you talk to. So I work for a company that's owned by a larger holding company that has some restrictions with AI use. And that's again for creative, like not for like we're talking non-music creative, so visual creative and like the production of a commercial for example. I think there's just lawyers. When you have lawyers involved, there's the risk, right? But at the end of the day, you're going to sort of have like the two roads. You're going to have the road that's like, I'm willing to take those risks and we'll say sorry later because we'd rather just put out great creative and figure it out. Or you have brands that are like, we can't challenge ourselves to put ourselves in this risk. So we're going to wait till those lawsuits come and then we're going to spend time looking at things. So I think you have people, brands and companies in two different camps from that side of things. But I do think from a music standpoint, you also have two camps. You have the wow, AI can really enhance my creativity and bring inspiration that I may have not thought about, like when creating music, right? But if you're, on the other hand, if you're working on platforms that are taking music from others to create their platform and create that algorithm, then you're probably going to struggle maybe with some legal issues down the line, which would then make brands more hesitant in licensing maybe some of these new AI tracks because we can't fully source the ownership for that music.
Are you leaning into any AI just to do your job and templates, or just in any aspect? Like, are you guys using ChatGPT or any others? Or
I would say our strategy team is definitely trying to encourage it. I think personally I use it for things, but professionally I'm still sort of dipping in as long as it's with the consent of the company. But yeah, talk to the head of strategy, and they'll probably be very optimistic and
yeah.
try to find the out of the box ideas with it. Yeah, for sure.
So one thing I'm like curious about, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are, is like, is everything going to head towards like an all media worldwide perpetuity license for the majority of licensing in the future, just as there's like new platforms and media? Because I know that drives up the cost so much. but is it actually going to become like broader rights and the fees will kind of come down with those broader rights eventually? Or do you still see it being like the term is going to be so tied to the media as the main thing? Because just for example, when I started, airing on TV was like that was the best. Like that was broadcast was like a big term you could always get a big budget for. But if you really think about it, paid media on YouTube probably gets you more eyeballs, bang for the buck, than even airing on TV anymore. So
Yeah.
it kind of has to shift at some point. I'm just curious, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're starting to see fees change in that respect, to your point. Like when TV sort of dominated the majority of the value of a piece of music that you would use license, or even a talent per se. If you have digital as a huge part of it now, digital fees are cranking up. So I feel like I don't know if they're ever going to be a point where they're synonymous, but I do think you're finding if you just license something for digital only and it's a big, catalog track that everybody knows, I think you're still going to have, you're going to have a high, the fees are going up. I think that's sort of like an industry wide situation, because I think you're always going to have songs that just have that premium value. Everyone knows them. It's nostalgic, it's emotional, it connects them to something greater. And I think, there's always and what I think you guys do great with, honestly, is like you guys were sort of at the forefront of like, we see this as kind of becoming a need for people and trying to solve for that. So I think you were definitely like ahead of the curve, like with Score a Score on that for sure, which is why like I was excited for us to eventually like get to know each other and be friends and work together so much. But
Thank you.
I think also, unless the music industry shifts so much that it just values things differently, I think licensing has become such a money maker for musicians and songwriters and these
Yeah.
music companies that I think I personally don't see a world where it ever like sort of equals out. But maybe there becomes sort of a standard like for these, like, this is generally the cost of what this is, like this is what you should expect if you're going to license a premium song in this sort of media. Like we generally have a gist of that now, but every song, every artist, especially when they're not all cleared, like you guys set up a lot of deals that are made with like a big artist and a label, is that the artist has to still give approval for a licensing use. So basically that means every single time the fee might change because that person decides today I want to be valued at this, tomorrow maybe I want to be valued at that. So I think when you're just dealing with people, regardless, it's going to be, I don't know that a standard could ever be established in that respect, because you're dealing with different personalities and people.
I want to go pretty high level, but also something that goes granular into a lot of the contracts and agreements you're dealing with. And maybe some of the people listening don't know these things. So, can you tell us about sort of like the hidden fees that you wouldn't necessarily think of that would be on a contract, like AFM, SAG? Those are very mysterious for a lot of people.
Yeah, of course. So I'm well versed with this to an extent because I have a lot of clients that are signatory to music unions. And so when we're talking about music unions in this particular conversation, we're mainly talking, as far as the US goes, we're talking about SAG or AFTRA. So that's sort of the artist and their vocal likeness. And then there's also AFM, which is the American Federation of Musicians, which supports musicians that are in the union. And so basically, anytime a song, let's say a brand in the US is licensing a song in the US, and the song was recorded under a union contract, whether it was an AFM contract, a SAG contract, or both, it could mean that extra money outside of your base fee to license the music, additional fees would be due to the singers of that song and or the musicians. And so in those situations, you would probably work with an expert, a signatory company, which there are a bunch of those out there, or reach out to the union directly so they can help navigate what your cost might be. And again, similar to a licensing fee, the cost there are sort of fixed rates for those things, but they're based on the usage of your commercial. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like if you flag a song that's popular and it has a 150-person choir, you end up paying all 150 people if it was recorded union.
Yeah, so we find this a lot. A big challenge in that, an extreme example is like movie scores, because obviously they're using big orchestras. Because if they were made in the U.S. and the orchestras in the U.S., then it's likely going to be a union recording. So in those cases, there could be 150 musicians, and then you get a big fat estimate that's $100,000 outside of your licensing fee, and that scares people, and I understand that. And so I know that there's companies like yours and even studios or film studios, because they usually own those rights, are starting to get savvier and create alternate recordings so that brands can still license the song without that heavy financial investment.
But you mentioned signatory to the unions, which means that they are opting to work with unions basically as a priority, right? Like, is that what that means? Are they allowed to work outside of unions at all when you're a signatory agency or brand?
Um, well, I think their signet union kind of has different layers. So as far as music goes, agencies or brands can use a non-union music, but if it was again recorded under a union contract, they still probably have dues to like additional money to pay. And also this really does become a project to project, like client has
Sure.
to sort of make that decision, because there are situations, for example, where the brand is not a union signatory, but they want to license a song that is a union recording. And so brand thinks, do I have to pay for that? And in a lot of cases they do, because what happens is if you don't, you might get fined by the union. But again, that becomes more in the legal business affairs
Right.
realm to make those choices. So I don't want to make any choices for anyone today. But I'd say if you have any questions or concerns, definitely go to your business affairs, because they'll be closest to your union reps and like know
Yes.
how to best navigate that. Yeah.
What about one of my favorite terms, geo-gates or geo-locking? Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. So um, they're basically the same, but essentially what that means, and this really only came up as internet and digital media has become so prevalent, but basically what it means is that you're able to sort of restrict your media online, that you can only see it in certain countries. So if you're saying, I want to license a song for just the US, and you have the ability to work with the platform that you're putting media on to lock it essentially, so someone in like the UK or in France can't see it, that is usually helpful from a negotiation standpoint, because I think it's generally recognized that global, digital media can get extended globally. But I do know now that I also work in foreign territories and international work too, that a lot of the foreign countries do like to request, or the rights holders in those countries do prefer, if possible, to sort of have those restrictions, because sometimes it does impact cost when you're licensing a song.
Nice. How about samples versus interpolations?
Yeah, so I mean, we hear it in hip hop all the time, and it's obviously in other genres as well. And I feel like it's popular because there's usually a nostalgia, everyone loves their nostalgia, so that's definitely having a big moment right now. But essentially, like how I understand the difference is that a sample is literally taking the musical work of someone else and literally like cut and paste. So whether you're using the same exact
Master
like
recording.
a section of the song, or you edit it, you reverse it, you do whatever. If you're literally copy pasting from another existing song, that would be considered a sample. And in those cases, if you're an artist and you are doing that, then you will definitely have to seek out approval from the original owners. And then in most cases, depending on how prevalent the sample is used in your song, they will take a big portion, a share of your rights. Usually on the publishing side is more commonly done. But in some cases, they might want all your 100% of publishing. In some cases, okay, you're only using part of this and like you created the new arrangement. So we'll do 50-50. So it will be very case by case depending on the song and sample. Interpolation is usually like, it's not the literal extraction of the song, but it's sort of the melody from a song that you use in yours. And then in those cases, it's not always a rights ownership issue. It's usually like you just approaching that person, you give them that heads up, and then you sort of work something out, whether it's ownership or you pay them for it. And that's sort of their arrangement.
Is that similar to a cover or different?
It's similar and different because when you're covering a song, the recording, if you're not extracting the audio from the original and you're creating as a musician a whole new arrangement, or you're using all new instruments, you're creating it yourself and you're just using the back end arrangement and lyrics, usually you can own that recording, but you probably still would have to work with the publisher to clear, to come up with some ownership. And it does happen a lot with commercial work. So if you're tasked, if you got a project as a musician and you're tasked at creating a cover as part of it, usually the publisher of that song will not allow that artist to get rights to that song. So I just did this last year with a license, and basically the ownership retains 100% with that original publisher, but the artist is able to own that new recording of the song.
So what's some words of caution if you're asked for a sound alike?
I mean, I live in the camp of stay away as far away
So
as
do we.
possible.
So do we.
Because we have this thing now, and with the help of SAG, frankly, of the union, it strengthens and emboldens talent to be able to come after people who borrow on people's likeness. And obviously, while this is slightly adjacent to commercials, like we had the strikes last year, right? And a big argument in that strike, what the SAG strikes and the writer strikes, was because of the AI and borrowing of likeness. So you could kind of look at it similarly, which is if you were trying to sound like someone famous, that's immediately, if someone asks you to do that, that might be your red flag, right? And so I think that's when it becomes, if you're in a situation as a rights holder or an artist, you say, wait a second, like there's risk here. And then you sort of evaluate what is it, then you could dive deeper with the creatives. What is it about this that you like? Is it just the vocal, is it the intonations in certain areas? Is it the instrumentation? Like you try to really work creatively to source out what it is, because of course a re-record of something or you creating something new is inspired by something. That's the way we live, right? We're all inspired by things and we use that to create new art. And so whether it's visual art, it's music, it's other things. So I think there's just certain probably key words like sound alike that you should always just put a little break on and say, what do we mean by that? And let's dive in further so you can really assess how risky it is. And if it's still an issue, definitely go to a lawyer about it.
Nice. Well, that's a good transition to my last question, which is what tips do you have for musicians, composers, artists that are looking to break in to having these Fortune 100 companies that you work with license their music?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, there are some trends-ish in the ad world. Like we were talking about covers, that's a big one. Obviously things that are feel good, happy, always sit well with clients. Rap is sort of getting back into it. So I feel like hip hop music with no samples is great. So if you're a musician, definitely spend some time working on that. But I think in general, advice I like to give is just network, use the resource. Internet is a crazy thing and an amazing thing at the same time. And I think, just connecting with people in your industry, researching, like you see a commercial online, like for example, everyone's working on Super Bowl campaigns now. look to see who are creating those ads, like look for those agencies, look for those producers, see some of those trades like Ad Age or Ad Week, they'll put the entire list of people that worked on that project, right? So like go looking for those, like go to the trades, go to these webinars, like people are doing this all the time, and I think some of those resources really are just there under our nose that we just don't always know. And so I would just say, like, to network with other people, go to that concert or go to that happy hour or whatever it is, and at least talk to one person you don't know, because you just never know like where a conversation is going to land you, and just stay positive. I mean, making music, I know I'm not a musician myself, although I did play the clarinet back in the day, is very, I know that takes a lot out of someone. It's emotional, it's vulnerable, and I feel like, just stay true to yourself. Don't go too, I want to be in every ad, so I'm going to make music like ads. The more you stay you're authentic and yourself, I think eventually that you see that through, and you find the homes for the place that, keeps your authenticity.
Amanda, thank you so much for joining us and giving us a half hour of just incredible insight and fun. It was awesome to hang with you. Thank you.
Of course, it's always a pleasure. I'm so happy we did this. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right, take care. Have a good day. Bye.